implications. Before I come across to you, I believe we are now getting audio, the audio clip of Prime Minister Modi speaking at the SCO Summit. Let's cut across.
As security, C, connectivity, O, opportunity. पहले स्तंभ S यानी सिक्योरिटी के संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा, शांति और स्थिरता किसी भी देश के विकास का आधार है। किंतु इस मार्ग में आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद और अतिवाद बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं। आतंकवाद सिर्फ किसी देश की सुरक्षा ही नहीं बल्कि पूरी मानवता के लिए एक साझा चुनौती है। कोई देश, कोई समाज, कोई नागरिक अपने आप को इससे सुरक्षित नहीं समझ सकता। इसलिए आतंकवाद से लड़ाई में भारत ने एकजुटता पर बल दिया। इसमें एससीओ रेट्स की बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही। इस वर्ष भारत ने जॉइंट इंफॉर्मेशन ऑपरेशन को लीड करते हुए अल कायदा और इससे जुड़े आतंकी संगठनों से लड़ने का इनिशिएटिव किया। हमने रेडिकलाइजेशन के विरुद्ध समन्वय बढ़ाने और मिलकर कदम उठाने का भी प्रस्ताव रखा। टेरर फाइनेंसिंग के खिलाफ आवाज उठाई। इसमें मेरे समर्थन के लिए मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, भारत पिछले 4 दशकों से निर्मम आतंकवाद का दंश झेल रहा है। कितनी ही माताओं ने अपने बच्चे खोए और कितने बच्चे अनाथ हो गए। हाल ही में हमने पहलगाम में टेररिज्म का बहुत ही घिनौना रूप देखा। इस दुख की घड़ी में जो मित्र देश हमारे साथ खड़े रहे, मैं उनका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। यह हमला केवल भारत की अंतरात्मा पर भी आघात नहीं था, यह मानवता में विश्वास रखने वाले हर देश, हर व्यक्ति को खुली चुनौती थी। ऐसे में प्रश्न उठना स्वाभाविक है, क्या कुछ देशों द्वारा आतंकवाद का खुलेआम समर्थन हमें स्वीकार्य हो सकता है? एक्सेलेंसी, हमें स्पष्ट रूप से और एक स्वर में कहना होगा कि आतंकवाद पर कोई भी डबल स्टैंडर्ड स्वीकार्य नहीं होंगे। हमें मिलकर आतंकवाद का हर रंग में, हर रूप में विरोध करना होगा। ये मानवता के प्रति हमारा दायित्व है। एक्सेलेंसी, अब मैं दूसरे स्तंभ सी यानी कनेक्टिविटी पर अपने विचार रखना चाहूंगा। भारत का हमेशा से मत रहा है कि मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी से केवल व्यापार ही नहीं बल्कि विश्वास और विकास के द्वार भी खुलते हैं। इसी सोच के साथ हम चाबहार पोर्ट और इंटरनेशनल नॉर्थ साउथ ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉरिडोर जैसे इनिशिएटिव पर काम कर रहे हैं। इनसे हम अफगानिस्तान और मध्य एशिया के साथ संपर्क बढ़ा सकते हैं। हमारा मानना है कि कनेक्टिविटी के हर प्रयास में संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान होना चाहिए। यही एससीओ चार्टर के मूल सिद्धांतों में भी विदित है। कनेक्टिविटी that bypasses sovereignty, losing trust and meaning. Excellency, तीसरा स्तंभ है O, यानी opportunity. Opportunity for cooperation and reform. 2023 में भारत की अध्यक्षता के दौरान नई ऊर्जा और विचारों का संचार हुआ। स्टार्टअप और इनोवेशन, ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिन, यूथ एम्पावरमेंट, डिजिटल इंक्लूजन और शेयर्ड बुद्धिस्ट हेरिटेज जैसे नए विषयों को अपने सहयोग में जोड़ा। हमारा प्रयास था कि एससीओ को सरकारों के परे भी ले जाए, सामान्य मानवी, यंग साइंटिस्ट, स्कॉलर्स और स्टार्टअप को भी आपस में जोड़े। हमारे पीपल टू पीपल टाइम को दृढ़ता देने के लिए मैं आज एक और सुझाव रखना चाहूंगा। एससीओ के अंतर्गत एक सिविलाइजेशन डायलॉग फोरम बनाया जाए। इससे हम अपनी प्राचीन सभ्यताओं, कला, साहित्य और परंपराओं को वैश्विक मंच पर साझा कर सकते हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, आज भारत रिफॉर्म, परफॉर्म, ट्रांसफॉर्म के मूल मंत्र पर आगे बढ़ रहा है। कोविड हो या वैश्विक आर्थिक अस्थिरता, हमने हर चुनौती को अवसर में बदलने का प्रयास किया। हम लगातार वाइड रेंजिंग रिफॉर्म पर काम कर रहे हैं। इसे देश में विकास के साथ साथ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सहयोग के लिए भी नए अवसर खुल रहे हैं। मैं आप सभी को भारत की विकास यात्रा से जुड़ने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, यह खुशी की बात है कि एससीओ भी समय के अनुरूप इवॉल्व हो रहा है। ऑर्गेनाइज्ड क्राइम, ड्रग ट्रैफिकिंग और साइबर सिक्योरिटी जैसे समकालीन चुनौतियों से निपटने के लिए 4 नए केंद्र बनाए जा रहे हैं। हम इस रिफॉर्म ओरिएंटेड माइंडसेट का स्वागत करते हैं। वैश्विक संस्थानों में रिफॉर्म के लिए एससीओ सदस्य आपसी सहयोग बढ़ा सकते हैं। संयुक्त राष्ट्र की 80वीं वर्षगांठ के अवसर पर हम एकमत होकर यूएन रिफॉर्म का आह्वान कर सकते हैं। ग्लोबल साउथ की आकांक्षाओं को आउटडेटेड फ्रेमवर्क में कैद रखना भावी पीढ़ियों के प्रति घोर अन्याय है। नई पीढ़ी के बहुरंगी सपनों को हम पुराने जमाने की ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट स्क्रीन पर नहीं दिखा सकते। स्क्रीन बदलनी ही होगी। एससीओ मल्टीलेटरलिज्म और इंक्लूसिव वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर का मार्गदर्शक बन सकता है। मुझे खुशी है कि इस महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर आज एक स्टेटमेंट जारी किया जा रहा है। एक्सेलेंसी, हम सभी पार्टनर्स के साथ समन्वय और सहयोग के साथ आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। मैं एससीओ के अगले अध्यक्ष किर्गिस्तान के राष्ट्रपति और मेरे मित्र प्रेसिडेंट जपारोव को शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
That was India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech at the Leaders meeting at the SCO Summit. He stated that India has played a positive role in the SCO. He's divided the acronym into three parts, stating that S stands for security, C stands for connectivity, and O stands for opportunity, he has stated. And come out and stated very clearly that terrorism remains a big challenge. India seeks unity in its fight against terror, and India has constantly spoken against terror financing. He has spoken about the tragedy of the lives lost in the Pahalgam terror attack back on the 22nd of April. He stated that no double standards on terrorism can be accepted, and that SCO must play a big role in the fight against terror. He's also stated that terrorism is a big threat to peace, and the fight against terror is India's commitment. He's spoken about starting a civilizational dialogue forum and stating that SCO nations must promote their traditions and culture through the forum, and that the organization itself has been evolving over the years in order to ensure that the global south is represented. He stated that the SCO can in fact lead a multilateral world order and therefore improve the situation of the people who are living across the world. Meanwhile, as I introduced Major General Sudhakarji before, thank you so much for your patience. We've just heard the Indian Prime Minister speak out at the SCO Summit. Quite a pointed message that is being given to the countries over there, especially with regards to terror. We do know the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is attending. We also know that during the SCO Defence Ministers meeting that was held a while back, the declaration, the joint document that was signed, had no mention of the Pahalgam terror attack, the attack that killed 26 innocent people in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir, which saw widespread condemnation from across the world. In fact, India's defense minister refused to sign that document when he was in China. Now, a pointed message by Prime Minister Modi. Do you think, considering the fact that China has been reaching out and we've been now seeing a slight improvement as far as economic ties are concerned, do you think China will take these points into consideration while drafting the joint document this year, especially considering the fact that it's 25 years of the organization's founding?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for getting me to your show. In fact, a little while back, I was in India News prior to the NewsX. My short answer to your question is yes. Why am I saying yes? Because there is a platform of convergence from where China, India, Russia are expected to respond to the global churn, the geopolitical churn. The platform of convergence, we are thankful to Donald Trump for having imposed arbitrary and impulsive tariff, meaningless, unjustifiable, irrational kind of tariffs in the 21st century. We are looking at, when you look at the Cold War 1.0 and Cold War 2.0, any citizen anywhere in the world is looking towards some semblance of rules-based international order, and who better than a superpower? A superpower resorts to uncivility, which they expect other countries to behave with some civility in our behavior and decorum. Well, I don't think this is the way. Lack of diplomatic skills at the highest level in the apex leadership. So therefore, I think all are in the same boat. And the circumstances unfolding in the world order, primarily because of Donald Trump's the tariff tyranny, I think that is doing wonders. Second thing which is actually doing wonders is bringing all three important leaders together, is the commitment which the president made during the election campaign, and his inability to reach any of them or achieve any of them in the given stipulated time frame. That is the second. And third is the double talk, double standard of the Western alliances. So therefore, all these things put together, they actually are, galvanizing the countries in the Asia, and thereby highlighting or underscoring one point: this is the century, Asia century. And in Asia, which is the country which is the brightest spot, the silver spot, that is the India. So having said this, a quick response to your point regarding the transborder terrorism. I think the Honorable Prime Minister of India has done well by, by emphasizing the point regarding the Pahalgam terror attack on 22nd April 2025, regardless of what the world thinks. It is our country. We need to project our point. We need to assert the security and the safety of our citizens. I think he's done a commendable job by forcing his way through or articulating in a very emphatic manner. Now, the call has to be taken by China. If China wants to have a credible image, a reliable image as a growing global power, and in an emerging, evolving situation in the global order, pandemic, thereafter Russia-Ukraine war, it has not come to an end. Thereafter, the Hamas and the Israeli conflict, thereafter the Pahalgam attack, and in the backdrop of the rising or increasing price of fuel, fertilizer, and food world over, not only global south, the global north is also affected. So, under these circumstances, if some semblance of stability, normalcy is expected, then I think Z will miss the bus. He will miss the opportunity if he doesn't toe the lines of expectations and the aspiration of India, because it's the biggest one of the biggest threat that the country is suffering. And it is not only India, it is the complete humankind or the mankind world over. India kept on making noise and kept on taking the matter about terrorism with a proposal of architecture to effectively contain and counter it way back in 96, 97 to United Nations Security Council. And since then, it has been gathering dust. Thank God 9/11 took place and America, like a superpower, they were besieged with the understanding which we are trying to make over the preceding 10 years or more than 10 years, that India was one of the countries which is worst affected. Let there be a common definition. Let there be a common architecture, a global war of terrorism based on which everyone should fight together with a common end and objective. That did not happen. So since it has not happened, I think it is a golden welcome opportunity which SCO is providing, mindful of the fact it is only a regional bloc. But the regional bloc is gradually assuming the status of a global bloc, thereby giving a chance to Xi, the President Xi of China, the chairperson of SCO this time, to actually capitalize and derive golden milestone out of it in his favor, in favor of the regional security and stability, in favor of the global peace, and he can put his best foot forward and extend towards the global arena to assert his authority and leadership.
All right, sir. I'd like to carry forward this conversation with Professor Mahoney, who's still with us, who's also waited rather patiently listening to the Indian Prime Minister's speech as well. Coming back to the India-China bilateral equation, particularly the economic equation, we do know that there is a deficit on India's end, nearly 100 billion US dollars. Both countries now, after the thaw in ties, after the border truce, are looking at enhancing trade again. China is India's second largest trading partner. But the exchange of goods and services was impacted after the Galwan clash in 2020. However, now both countries have agreed to resume border trade through 3 points, Lipu Lake, Shipkila and Nathula. India is also eyeing access to Chinese rare earths and magnets, and all in all, the second and the fourth largest economy are now putting up a joint front against Trump's tariffs. Will China open its markets to Indian companies in order to reduce this deficit? Because that is one of India's main concerns. And what are the implications of this for the world economy at large?
Well, trade is a two-way street. You know, I think there are a lot of opportunities for complementarity, lots of opportunities for the law of comparative advantages to work its magic. Some markets are rather sensitive in China, like pharmaceuticals, given the fact that these are, at least in terms of basic medicines, these are largely state-owned companies that have, let's say, unhealthy relationships with hospitals, which depend on those relationships for funds. And so it's very difficult to sort of open that market in a way that doesn't create a lot of other problems downstream politically and economically for China. I do think that this can be resolved. I actually think there's an opening for this, and I've made proposals to both Indian diplomats and the government to that end. But the bottom line is I can foresee the two sides working through some trade deals, but it won't be easy. Of course, previously, India was unable to commit to RCEP, so we have to wonder to what extent the Indian economy is prepared for some sort of free trade agreement with China, despite the FTA progress we've just seen between the UK and India. But contrary to some of the earlier discussions on this channel that I was listening to this morning, and reinforced now by listening to the Prime Minister's speech, I suspect the primary focus here is on security. And I'm even optimistic that we might eventually see a strategic partnership, this rubric preferred by China, especially after both leaders in Tianjin said they're cooperation partners and not rivals. Security is the first priority, as President Xi has said on many occasions. He said that security is vital for economic development, and I think certainly this wisdom applies to China-India ties as the difficult lessons of experience attest. And here, I'd go back to my colleague's point. I mean, we have to recall that a lot of what he's referring to as terrorism, this was something that was instigated largely by the U.S. Working with the ISI in Pakistan in the 1970s to create trouble for Afghanistan. And we're still living in the long, dark shadow of that, with the Talibs that they created and the formation of Al-Qaeda that came in to support them. And we continue to see, I think, unfortunately, an Indian government that has played the game of exploiting the U.S. Versus China and wearing out its welcome in Washington, only to find the door open again in Beijing, and then vice versa. But I think I think certainly the Chinese side sees that this is a dead end, and is not going to abandon Pakistan. But I do think that China will be useful for playing an instrumental role in finding some sort of reconciliation for the region, if not between India and Pakistan. Nevertheless, I think we will see some early returns related to improved trade as this meeting moves forward, as both countries are keen to address these concerns given headwinds from Washington. But above all, I think their primary concern is security, not only on their own borders, but throughout the region.
Indeed. Speaking of security and Washington, I'd like to rope in Major General Sudhakar into the discussion once again. Now, despite its differences with China on the border, something that both countries are looking to address, India has now practically reset ties in a way. India is a member also of the Quad grouping. What's interesting is that there are reports coming in from American publications such as the New York Times that Trump might not make it to the Quad Summit that India is going to be hosting later this year. We've seen statements come in from Japan and Australia in the meanwhile, reinforcing their support for this grouping. So how does it augur for ties bilaterally between India and the US, as well as the larger Indo-Pacific security framework in the long run?
Excellent. Pia, must compliment you for a very, very relevant and important question you have asked. Two issues you have raised. One is the bilateral relations between India and US, and second is about the efficacy or sustainability of the very institutional framework of Quad. The first and foremost thing is Indo-US. Let me very briefly put across. Little while back in your channel only, I said India and the US have had a very regressive or a period of estrangement prior to 2000. Post 2000, there has been a period of engagement. By and by, there are institutional legacies which have been actually established. No matter what happens in top, because of personality-driven idiosyncrasies, the institutions will continue to operate. Had it not been so, we wouldn't have had a group captain Shukla going to the satellite station and coming back. And we wouldn't have had the Nisar I think jointly, it is a joint venture between India and NASA the ISRO and NASA. NISAR is a satellite which has been launched few days back only. Had it not been so, you wouldn't have been seeing in the media that India has gone in for signing a big contract with the aerospace engine GE to get the engines for our Tejas aircraft. Had it not been so, the joint training wouldn't have been going on. So there are many activities which are going on by virtue of the fact of institutional linkages which have been established and number of host of agreements which have been signed. Part of them are bipartisan, part of them are vulnerable to being muted or being modified from time to time, but majority of them are actually long lasting and based on the paradigm of one concept, that is the necessity of Indo-Pacific. So if one president comes for 4 years by virtue of transactional requirements and parameters or need of the hour, as per his perception and understanding, and by the political weightages, if he changes, there is something documented in black and white and going on for past several years. It cannot be changed. The bipartisan doctrine of US is that I may not be reproducing the words or the language in the same form for lack of correct expression. The China continues to remain the number one threat. And therefore, the architecture of the global security has to be based on a paradigm of Indo-Pacific. And in that, coming to the second point, is the Indo-Pacific, the Quad. We need to understand, Pia, as to the genesis of Quad. How did and why did Quad come into existence? Take your mind back to 2004 tsunami, wherein the territorial, I would say, the rim countries of Indian Ocean region, they were the worst affected, and the India played a very important role in that, in rescue operations. And consequent to which, there was some consultation between Australian leadership and the Japanese leadership, and may his soul rest in peace, Mr. Abe of Japan, Japanese Prime Minister, during his visit to India in 2007, he proposed, as a consequence of the need-driven disaster management rescue operations, why not we actually get the countries, like-minded countries together and form a grouping wherein we should be able to extend as fast or quickest responders to such kind of disasters so that lots of human lives and the properties and assets can be prevented from suffering or succumbing to the disaster. So that was the start point. If that is the start point, well, it has taken a connotation. Now it is a kind of a economic grouping of the alliance. Military alliance is not being talked about. Well, it cannot be denied in times ahead. If that be the kind of a requirement, it includes your technology, critical technology. It includes your vaccines in case of pandemic. It includes your connectivity project, infrastructure, weather, and a host of other activities, economy. So therefore, at the moment, I think we would do well to continue with the same. And coming to the point that you raised, whether Donald Trump comes or not, well, it is the call, it is the leadership. Since Donald Trump had revived the very concept of Quad, which had gone into a hibernation or dormant phase of its growth between 2007 to 2017, Donald Trump only he revived. It is only his assertion that this needs to be revived. The Quad came into preeminence, its erstwhile existential status in 2017. If he doesn't come, well, he has to think it over. He needs to introspect that is USA looking at the long-term perspective threats and the challenges for the world order. Does it wish to continue as a superpower or whatever you call it, declining superpower, or it would like to abandon and raise its hand and let China come in? So these are the moot questions which have to be answered by. Therefore, my take is, notwithstanding the report given in New York Times, I still feel till the last day, given the mindful of the fact, the transactional kind of approach and response of Donald Trump, I still feel that it will be in prudence and it will be beneficial to one and all that the USA president makes it to India, comes and attends this particular thing. And in any case, it is not a military alliance. It is an alliance of the disaster management, the economy, the pandemic issues, and such like issues. And I think it will do good if he reconsiders his options
Indeed.
and attends the meeting scheduled the later part of the year.
All right, so I'd like to thank you. I'd also like to thank Professor Mahoney for taking out time, sitting with us on NewsX World as we track all of these developments of